Hey guys, welcome to another painting walkthrough. Um, Here we can see I start off with a photograph I took in Birmingham. That's here in the UK for all of you international guys. It's a photo I took from a quite a famous bridge actually that leads to a Bullring shopping mall, iconic Selfridges building, and I took it facing the just sort of out to the city, and I really like the composition of it, the way the bridge sort of went along. And so I thought I'd use it as a basis. So here you can see me just using that as a reference, and then just sketching kind of where the buildings would be. Really using just the idea of the bridge going across the middle as a main focus, and then this road that goes out of the city. To add a little bit more interest to that bridge, I've got a few characters on there as well, and I've added an extra car at the bottom as well, which will later, one of those will later become a police car, just to add a little bit more intrigue. I actually start by drawing in a little spaceship here, but later on I get rid of it because it just becomes a little bit too complicated. I've then, as you can see here, I brought in an image from Final Fantasy VII. I think it's some concept artwork, and I picked out some of the key colors because I really like the color scheme of it, of that kind of teal and gold with a bit of blue in there. So what I did is color picked the main colors and mapped them out almost like a color palette, and then I used those as a basis to get these kind of like a wash of color over the top of the canvas. Using the primer brush there, and then I'm going in with the flat brushes and just marking out where I want the buildings. One thing I've started to learn is actually, particularly with nighttime paintings, is use the darkest colors first to map out where I want everything, and then start building light on top of that. And that way it stops me from over sort of saturating it with lights and neon looks and all that kind of stuff, which makes the painting sometimes a little bit messy. So here you can see I'm just going in with the flat brush now, just painting where I want the lights over the top of the darker colors. It still is a bit messy at first, and it does take a while for me to sort of tone it back. And I think the main thing I was struggling here was, again, you've probably heard me say this a million times, was depth. At the moment, even though the sort of cityscape in the background looks very, very close, it looks too close for comfort. So that road doesn't really give you a sense of that road going out into the distance. I really wanted to make the bridge quite prominent as well, so I lit that up with brighter colors. I haven't quite got the colors of the bridge right yet. You can see I've used maybe a yellow with a bit too much green in it. Confused a little bit about what kind of illumination is going to happen as well. So there's a bit of a blue illumination on top of the characters there, which isn't quite working. But again, it's just the initial laying down the foundations, just so I can get an idea of where I want things. You can see there as well, I'm painting in almost like a forest, but after adding in a few highlights, it starts to look like a fire coming out the building. Painting over the background again, just trying to get that depth, and you can see the technique I've used now is I've actually lightened the sky in the distance, so it's quite dark in the foreground, and I've lightened the sky quite a bit. And actually now the buildings feel very far away, because the color of the buildings, isn't that different to the sky itself, so it does feel very misty. Got a bit more clarity on the bridge there with the I don't know what they're called now, the things that hold the bridge up, going into some kind of water or mist. And you can see that depth now is starting to be created because I've got it very, very dark at the bottom of the painting, and it gets lighter towards the top. And so that just really gives a feeling of everything moving further and further away. Starting to add quite a bit of detail to these buildings now. One of the things I always struggle with is I really do like my flat brushes. They're very, very enjoyable to paint with, but sometimes it can become a little bit messy when you're painting over the top. However, one thing I started to realize was the more I paint over the top, and I remove the blending mode, I put it back to normal, and I just paint over the top with slightly different hues or slightly different saturation or slightly different brightness. It actually really builds up the depth and the sort of intricacy of the building. So it starts to feel that there's a lot of brickwork or cladding or whatever that might be. And it certainly works in the foreground. And it's not quite working on that very bright building on the left-hand side, but it's definitely working on the building on the right, far right-hand side. And I start to build that up more and more and more. And I actually use, if you look at the brush settings, there's actually one of the settings is, I can't remember what it's called now, but there's a variation in colour. And you can actually change whether there's a variance in saturation, brightness, or hue. And that really helps just create depth over the top as you just keep painting over the top, and it kind of layers it up. Just painting in the cars now using the angled brush. Angled brush really just using for a bit more detail. The flat brush are good for putting in large strokes, just like you would in real life. Large flat paintbrush just to kind of shape out large structures. But when it comes to things like the intricate things like a car or people, that small angled brush is much, much better. I had an idea here to have a billboard facing away so we kind of see the back of the billboard, but it really is key not to take too much attention away from what you want. So here I'm bringing a photo in. That's a photo of my wife, which you've probably seen quite a few times now. Trying to bring her in as like a neon sign, almost like that's a shop in the foreground. But I think it just becomes very much. It steals all the attention away from everything else in the painting, and so what I did, I just completely got rid of it. And that's what's helpful about painting, and then leaving it for a day, coming back, and then looking at it and thinking, yeah, it's just not working. Another really good trick, which you may or may not have heard, is flipping the canvas. So I've got flip canvas set to F1 for Photoshop. So I do sometimes flip the canvas, and it just gives you a brand new perspective on your painting. It might look absolutely brilliant to you in the way you're looking at it, and that's because your perception is skewed a little bit. When you flip the canvas, it actually starts to look like a completely new painting, and you start to see a lot of the flaws. Here you can see I'm painting over that building again, and I'm trying to layer it up this time. Adding in a few more lights here, but yeah, completely layering over that building, and just it starts to add a lot more depth, getting a bit more of an idea of the structure of the cladding. So these kind of almost like tubes or pipes going up. I added this shape from one of my custom shapes to the front of the bridge here, just to give a bit of detail to the bridge. Started experimenting with bringing a few lights in the background from some stock photographs using some blending modes. Wasn't really happy with the results. I did used to do this quite a lot, but it actually, with my new painting style, it's not really working too well. And so I end up just going in with the flat brush, painting in some lights, and it actually does a much better job. I actually set it to scatter as well, so I could paint it over a large spread and have a lot of variance in the position of where those windows and lights are coming from. And then I just go in and add a bit more detail in the places that I want. That is really starting to look like a fire now as well. If you do like that, unfortunately, it doesn't stay for the entire painting. It does go. Just decisions, just making lots and lots of decisions, wondering what I should do, what I shouldn't do, what works, what doesn't. And that, unfortunately, was something for me that didn't work. Starting to add a few more shadows in those buildings in the background to give a bit more, again, depth and variance. And you can see some of those buildings feel like they're going off into the mist as well. One thing I should mention is I've updated the brush pack as well. There is a skyscraper brush now, which is basically the flat brush, but it's mirrored. And so when you paint, it actually paints skyscrapers. So that's, if you saw earlier, that's how I painted those skyscrapers so quickly. Because I didn't use a flat brush, I just used this skyscraper brush, and it just basically plunked a bunch of high-rise buildings in the background. Very abstract and very kind of like impressionistic, but it does a really good job. So do have a look at that. Starting to get some reflections there. Got some traffic going off into the distance. Got a bit of a sunset in the distance as well, almost like a burning sky, very, very low. And you can see that it feels like there's like a river going across there where the bridge is above, and you can see the reflections in there. So adding in some of the details of the characters. So that's supposed to be Anya there, standing, waiting, looking over the bridge. I got rid of Mido the cat. just didn't work in this instance. Now, I did find it very difficult trying to paint in the impression of these characters. Again, I've spoke about this before, but I was trying to add too much detail to such a small space on the canvas. But painting from a distance, so from this kind of view, made it tricky to get the level of detail right. So it just has to be just enough detail for you to get that it's a person, but not enough detail that it makes it look out of place in this painting. So that was a bit tricky. I did a better job with these two characters at the bottom. So there's just a few different sources of lights. They're very, very dark because it's dark down there. And then I've just got sort of the blue, whitish highlight on the one side coming from the car, and the more orangey highlights coming from the windows of the buildings there. Just using that angle brush to shape out this car. Something I didn't really think I would enjoy was painting cars. It's kind of always felt like a bit of a nightmare to me. But the more you understand how light hits an object, and as I've been going out and driving and dropping my kids off at school and things like that, I've been really observing cars and seeing how light hits them, and actually they're much more enjoyable to paint when you understand how it works on the material. It's like that metal material that you got. So here I'm painting in the bridge, painting right over the top of it again. Took me a while to be happy with this particular bit because it was the sort of main focus of the painting. This bridge going across, I wanted it to work a treat, but it was a bit of a struggle. What I did like in the end was that kind of gold sheen I had across the middle of it. It really provides a really good contrast to the rest of the painting. If you take the bridge away, you can see it's very dark at the bottom. It gets brighter towards the top and sort of more desaturated as it goes into the distance. But there wasn't really much interest. But this bridge right across the middle, now that it's almost glowing and it's got this sort of bronze sheen to it, it feels very almost, what's the word, steampunkish in a way. And it just provides a nice contrast really to the rest of the painting, and there's a bit more of a story there as well. This was an idea I had of a person walking the other way, and I wanted him to be looking at his phone. And then I've got a couple a bit closer on that bridge walking the opposite way, and I've got Anya right in the middle looking out into the city in the distance there. I mean, I was fairly happy with the characters, but I think if I was to say which characters I would choose and wanted to sort of copy that style, it was the couple on the right-hand side. I think I got them right. The other two, I think perhaps a little bit too much detailing. So putting these lights back in there, so these bridge lights that I'd come up with earlier, just putting them in place to add, a reason for this bright light to be on this bridge. So, I mean, it couldn't just be that bright orange colour for no reason. So I had to get a source of light here for this to work. Getting in the look of the police car there. So just the lights, the red and the blue contrast there. And I really like it. But one thing I really like about the cars is it illuminates the darkness below. So there's lots of interest in this painting. What I'm hoping is that it doesn't feel like you don't know where to look. What I'm hoping is that no matter where you look, you find interest. That's really the goal. But obviously, the thing that draws you in is supposed to be that bridge, is the centre of the painting. And then you can kind of travel out from there as you look at it. So getting a bit more detail in, trying to get Anya's clothing right on this. So it's that kind of signature outfit that I usually have her wearing. So I'm just trying to get that right here. Still trying to work on that fireplace. Well, I say fireplace, but like fire. I then try adding in a bit more of that water instead. And that actually does work in the end. So it feels like there's a river going right the way across, just in front of the city, almost like it's a harbour. Sort of Manhattan style, and getting lots of reflections in there. But I think what I end up doing is putting trees in that place where there was a bit of a forest, like just roadside trees. It was just a little bit empty otherwise in that area. Getting the glow from that sunset right in the distance as well, just having hints of it on the edge of the buildings that are further towards the distance. Experimenting with the lights in the foreground, but just trying to be careful not to go overboard. What I really like about the finished piece of this is it looks like the stuff in the foreground, it feels like slums. It's like a bit dilapidated, I suppose. A few lights on, but there's sort of, business. It's not business as usual anymore. Things have sort of changed in this area, and it feels like it's a bit run down. And then you've got that big city in the distance where big business happens, and maybe the rich people live. So that's what I was trying to get across with this piece. So you can see me drawing in a few trees. They do move in a second. Didn't look quite right there. Again, that distance for the sense of depth didn't work, so I brought them closer to that building there. And I've got the light from these sort of windows just shining onto the trees and casting a bit of a shadow. Getting a bit of reflections. One thing that actually makes reflections really work, which I didn't realise at first, and I think I kind of learned it quite a bit with this one, was as well as it being reflecting, the buildings that are at the top, and you've got this sort of white sheen over the top, it needs dark areas as well. It's that contrast between the darkness and the sort of bright spots that make it feel like a reflection. So getting in the darkness of the buildings was quite key to making that reflection work. And you'll see in a moment what I mean. I'll start bringing in a sort of a dark brush, try and make that work. Here's me experimenting with some lookup tables, as I usually do. Just deciding whether I've got the colours right or whether there's slight changes that need to happen. One of the great things about painting digital. And then taking it into Camera Raw to make some fine adjustments. Usually one of the main things I do is sharpen, and then I add one of their filters. Sometimes I don't add a filter at all. It's just nice to experiment. I think I did add a slight filter on this one. And then I'm bringing in a texture, a canvas texture to go over the top, which I multiply a couple of times and then use something like soft light over the top just to give a feeling of a being painted on a canvas. Making some slight adjustments again. Coming in and just detailing around some of the areas. As you can see, I wasn't happy with that initial texture, so I deleted it, and I've brought in this other canvas texture here, which I think works a little bit better. A bit more of a blue tint to it as well. And there we have it. So I hope you enjoyed that one, and I'll see you on the next one. Thanks for watching, guys.